Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us once again for Health Professional Radio. We'll be speaking with returning guest Dr. Steve Marcus. He's joining us here, of course, as CEO of Cantex Pharmaceuticals to discuss the launch of clinical studies focusing on the combination with radiosurgery in patients with brain metastases and other serious conditions. Welcome back, Steve. How have you been?
I've been well, thank you.
Of course, you are a contributor. For those who may not be familiar with you as a contributor, why don't you go ahead and give us a bit of your professional and personal background, then let's jump right into this new compound.
Sure. Well, by background, I'm a physician trained as a medical oncologist and went into the pharmaceutical industry, about 30 years or so ago. And as such, I've been responsible for developing a number of important drugs. Two drugs for multiple sclerosis are drugs I'm directly responsible for, one called beta-seron, another called oral cladribine. I also have developed a number of drugs for treatment of cancer. And at this point, I'm CEO of Cantex Pharmaceuticals, which is focused on developing drugs for cancer. And we have one drug in particular, which is extremely interesting, and looking forward to discussing that with you.
Let's talk about this drug. It's my understanding that it was indicated for Alzheimer's initially?
Yes. The drug is called Azeliragon, and it was originally developed as a treatment of Alzheimer's disease. And it was in clinical trials that involved over 2,000 patients. And unfortunately, it did not have effectiveness in Alzheimer's disease. But the mechanism by which it functions is highly relevant for cancer. And after the drug did not work for Alzheimer's disease, I approached the company that was developing it and was able to acquire the license for the drug and have responsibility for its further development. Importantly, the drug is an oral drug and was extremely well tolerated by patients. And if this can be translated into effectiveness as well as a high level of safety in cancer, it would be very important.
When you were here last time, you spoke about RAGE, R-A-G-E. Remind the audience about RAGE and the role that your lead compound plays in controlling it.
Sure. RAGE is a short name for the receptor for advanced glycation end products. And a receptor is something on the surface of the cell that sends signals to the cell telling it to do things. And in the case of RAGE, it sends signals to cancer cells which promote their growth and their spread and their resistance to radiation and chemotherapy. And what Azeliragon does is it blocks RAGE. A receptor requires a ligand meaning something to bind to it. It requires something to bind to it in order to send its signal, kind of like a key is required to open up a door by fitting into the lock. And what Azeliragon does is it blocks RAGE from binding to everything that binds to it, from binding to its ligands, and by doing that, it functions.
Clinical development has been ongoing since we last spoke. Tell me about your phase 1 and 2 study for the first-line treatment of metastatic pancreatic cancer being conducted at the Allegheny Health Network.
Yes, that trial is in progress, and Allegheny Health Network in Pittsburgh has done a wonderful job of contributing to that study, along with Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, which is another major pancreatic cancer center. And they've been enrolling patients into a study for patients who have not responded to previous treatments for pancreatic cancer. All of these patients, all of these people have metastatic pancreatic cancer, which means the cancer is spread through the body, mainly to the liver, and we're now enrolling patients into that clinical trial.
There are some details I'm sure that you can share about the phase 2 study on the first-line treatment of unmethylated glioblastoma that was conducted at Lenox Hill Hospital.
Yes, that trial is in progress. It's combining Azeliragon with radiation therapy as a treatment for newly diagnosed unmethylated glioblastoma. The significance of the word unmethylated is that those people have a worse prognosis and they tend to be resistant to chemotherapy. So a new treatment is greatly needed for these patients. That trial is in progress, not only at Lenox Hill Hospital, but now is in progress at several other medical centers all in the United States.
And you're also developing a treatment for brain metastases as well, yeah?
Yes, and so there too, Azeliragon may enhance the effectiveness of radiation therapy, radiation therapy is really one of the most important treatments for patients with brain metastasis, and the stereotactic radiosurgery, which means a highly focused beam of radiation to the tumor, is what's being combined with Azeliragon. That study is going on at the Miami Cancer Institute, which is one of the leading centers investigating new treatments of brain metastasis.
Cantex pipeline has historically been filled with challenging forms of cancers. Why does Cantex think that RAGE inhibition is especially well suited to target these challenging cancers?
Well, because there's robust preclinical information, in other words, information in animal studies and in laboratory studies that suggests that those cancers may be sensitive to the ability of RAGE inhibition to have a therapeutic effect. In brain tumors, there were really excellent studies indicating that Azeliragon may enhance the effectiveness of radiation therapy. In pancreatic cancer, there's preclinical information suggesting it might not only control the cancer, but also might control some of the problems that emerge with pancreatic cancer, such as the severe pain and the weight loss that's associated with pancreatic cancer. Those things may also be RAGE-driven events.
Would you please share some information about your Phase 3 trial for the treatment of hospitalized patients that are being treated for COVID-19?
Yes. There's information that in addition to its anti-cancer effects, inhibiting RAGE may also have an effect on systemic inflammatory disorders. And what happens with COVID is one of the biggest issues with COVID is not only the virus infection, but the virus infection causes, which is severe inflammation in the lung and in the kidney area, which can lead to failure of those organs. And this is really the big problem with COVID. Even though the virus may be gone, the effects of the virus, which is the inflammation in the body and particularly in the lungs, remains. And so Azeliragon may potentially control or block that inflammatory response. And therefore, the trial that's going on right now at the University of Michigan is involving patients who are hospitalized with COVID infection to see whether Azeliragon can prevent those people from worsening and developing either kidney failure or lung failure. Of course, that would reduce the risk of not only death, but also the risk of prolonged hospitalization and also prolonged recovery. So it's a very important clinical trial which is going on. It's what you call a randomized placebo-controlled Phase 3 trial.
When it comes to COVID-19, are we talking people that are hospitalized with initial symptoms and problems, or are we talking about people that are suffering from long COVID who need to be hospitalized because of that?
No, it's all people with the initial diagnosis of COVID, and it's people who are at risk of developing lung failure. So usually it's people with low levels of oxygen in their bloodstream or other major problems that are associated with acute infection with COVID.
Always a pleasure. Hopefully you'll come back and give us some more information. Thank you so much.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with returning guest Dr. Steve Marcus. Audio copies of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au, also at Anchor, Spotify, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.